I recall last time the weather was better, but we're not here for the weather. We're here to share, to learn from each other, to get some new insights, to get some new ideas. And that's what I'm going to be doing today, to share what I've learned about psychological safety. And allow me to start with a story. I was asked by a team to facilitate a retrospective. And I looked at the team and got some idea on where they were, what kind of things that they were doing, and thought about an exercise that I would like to do with the team. Gather some sticky notes, markers, flip over all the stuff, like neatly prepared. Like, okay, I'm going to help this team to find some great improvements. In the room that morning, and the people were coming in from the team. And I noticed something. I was looking at the people when they came in and when they were sitting down, and they were silent. Some of them were looking down. So it felt to me like, hmm, there's something there. There's something there. I just couldn't get my hands on it, what it was, but there was something there. So I decided to put away the sticky notes and the markers and all the stuff, like I might need them later, and start with a check-in exercise. So I asked the people in the room, okay, could you tell me in one word how you feel right now? What are your feelings? And at first, the people were silent. Found a little bit difficult to speak up, which I can imagine, like retrospective facilitator outside the team. Some of them knew me, some didn't. And then the first person spoke up and said, oh, okay. He didn't really look okay, but if okay was the word for him, that's okay for me. It's his word. I'm okay with that. And then I looked around, and the second person spoke up and said, well, challenged would be the word for me, challenged. Okay. Third person said, troubled. Hmm. And then another person spoke to another person, and one other person mentioned hurt. Whoa, hurt. At that point, I knew that I wouldn't need my fancy stuff. I wouldn't need sticky notes and put up flip charts and ask people to write down what they have seen and how they would like to improve, because that's not going to work. We've got a different situation here. So I started asking questions. And I also started stimulating the other people in the room to ask questions and to share why they came up with that word. What was behind that? Why did they feel troubled? Why did they feel hurt? And the story started coming out. And I'm not going to share the details because what happens in the retrospective stays in the retrospective. But basically, they had a problem in the past sprint, which was really a major problem. Things really broke down. But it wasn't that much the problem that worried them. It was the fact that everybody in the team had known about the problem for months, but nobody brought it up. Nobody dared to share the problem in the team. I'm not even talking about outside the team or to their manager. Nobody dared to share the problem. And they all knew about it. It was just not just one elephant in the room, it was a whole herd of elephants in the room. They all knew about it. And this scared them, like, hey, if we know about the problem, why didn't we bring it up? So we changed the discussion to look into what stopped them from bringing it up. What would help them from even just sharing their worries, even just sharing, like, there might be something there. I feel afraid. I think we're going to fail. I think we're not going to make our commitments. And we got some interesting discussions going in there, and we got some ideas out. But the most important thing is that the team managed, during those discussions, to raise their level of safety just a little bit. They felt safer as a team going out of the room as they felt when they came in. That was actually the big gain from this retrospective. We didn't have nice actions. We didn't need nice actions. We managed, as a team together, and me as a facilitator, to raise the level of psychological safety in this team, which helped them that in a similar situation, at least one or two persons would feel safe enough to speak up and get the discussion going and handle a similar problem before it would go out of hand. And I think that was a big benefit to the team. It was a while ago that I did this retrospective, and I knew some stuff about psychological safety. I've seen some things, but I didn't really know all the details there. But it triggered me, like, reflecting back on this retrospective, retrospecting my own retrospective, like, hey, what happened in here? I didn't have a plan. For me, this went naturally. I saw what was happening in there. I decided sticky notes are not going to do it. We're just going to facilitate the discussion and see if that helps the team. So reflecting back, I noticed, like, okay, I was working with different aspects. I was working with creating a kind of micro safety for the team to talk about the safety in the team, making it just safe enough to talk about safety. Today, I want to share what I learned about psychological safety in that one retrospective, many other sessions, hoping that this kind of stuff can also help you to deal with these kind of situations when you feel like the team needs some help with this. Okay. So what I do mostly these days is work with companies, help them improve. It's a one-person company. And I focus on things that I have knowledge about, have skills about, and that the companies actually need. So there can be a broad variety of things. I wrote a couple of books on topics like retrospectives, quality, problem solving. And I'm also using a lot of tools when I work with teams, because I found out that things like gamification can really help to get organizations going, to get people into acting their new way of thinking. And one of those tools actually on psychological safety, we'll see more of that. So, what is psychological safety? And I prefer to use the definition from Amy Edmondson, which is psychological safety is a shared belief by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Shared belief. So it's not just one person in the team, it's more persons. It doesn't have to be everybody, but it's more persons who feel that, okay, in this space, in the team that I'm working in, I feel safe enough to bring up an issue. I feel safe enough to mention something that's bothering me, or mention something that I think is good, bring in another view on a topic. And SAFE is about interpersonal risk taking. So it's not about just my work, the things that I'm doing. No, with SAFE I mean safe for the work that the team as a whole is doing. Something that might impact the way that I work with my colleagues in the team. That might impact the way the whole team is working. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about in the team. How we are communicating, how we are collaborating, any issues that we are facing in the team as a whole. That is the kind of stuff that you talk about when you talk about psychological safety. And if that level of psychological safety is there, and this is not an absolute, right? This can be low to high, and you can be anywhere on that scale. But this kind of psychological safety will increase the personal engagement of teams and will make sure people feel included into the team, feel safe enough to talk about something, to bring up issues, speak about anything that's worrying them. And it will also help team if something helped, like the team that I talked about in my story that had a problem. They will feel safe enough to share the issue, talk about it, and to learn from it. To learn from failures and prevent similar failures in the future. So this is the kind of stuff that psychological safety can do for a team. So why is this important? Why does it matter? If you look at team effectiveness, one of the studies that Google did on their teams, exploring like, okay, we got a lot of teams working in our organization. What are the teams that are doing better, that are high performing? And they found out that those high performing teams had 5 key things that made them different compared to the other teams. And they used a lot of data, they did interviews. I don't think the real details of the story of their research were ever revealed. But they shared their conclusions, and what they stated was from the 5 key things, the number one thing that really stood out was psychological safety. That was by far the most important thing from those 5 dynamics that made those high-performing teams perform on a different level compared to the other teams. People dared to speak up, people dared to mention issues in there, felt safe enough to explore their problems, and that made a really big difference in the performance of those teams compared to the other teams within Google. So, another thing, why it's important. Well, I think people can only feel safe enough challenging the status quo when they feel they are included in the team, when they feel they are a member of the team, that they feel safe enough to contribute anything that they think will help the team, and also feel safe enough to ask questions. And it's not about questions to judge, it's about questions to understand. They want to understand the situation better, and together in the team, they want to build a collective understanding of what they are facing right now, and use that collective understanding to decide, okay, what will be a good way to deal with this? What is it that we can do to solve this problem? Or what is it that we can do to become better in an area where we are already good? So if you want to change things in a team, people should be safe enough to mention things, but also to ask questions. What can leaders do if they're aiming for team effectiveness? Well, they can nurture this culture of safety, and one of the ways to do this is being vulnerable themselves. So showing that they don't have all the answers. Yeah, this links back to what Jenny was telling us this morning. Be vulnerable. Dare to say, like, I don't know all the answers. And I know that can be challenging, but it is a fact. Nobody knows all the answers. Not even if you're a leader, not even if you're a leader for 10 years. So, putting yourself vulnerable, saying that like, okay, I'm not sure or I don't know, or I don't know this. I need some help with that. That can create a culture of safety in the team. The other things that they can do is reduce human debt. Human debt is somewhat similar to technical debt. It's all the stuff that you should have done as a leader, but haven't done or weren't able to do it. It's like somebody coming into your room like, I got a problem, and having to say like, yeah, I know, but I got a management meeting coming up in 5 minutes and I have to prepare my presentation, so can we do this later? And then maybe forgetting to have the conversation. This kind of human debt can accumulate over time, and when this becomes too big, that's going to decrease the level of psychological safety in your organization. So what should you do? Get rid of that debt. Pick up that conversation. And you might start with saying, I'm sorry, we should have had it earlier, but I was really very busy. But I still think it's important. Would you be okay with talking about this tomorrow? Raising the level of psychological safety by reducing that human debt. There's a lot of things you can do as a leader, and the most important thing in there is also just show the behavior that you would like to see with the people in your team. So if you want people in a team to take risks yourself. If you want them to experiment with something new, experiment yourself. Start as a leader and give the example how you want to do it. So let's look at a couple of aspects of psychological safety. And for instance, this can be an aspect. People support one another when something goes wrong. So when there's a problem, it's not like, okay, you got a problem and I'm sorry, I'm very busy, I can't deal with it. No, you can reach out for help or people can jump in to help you. Something like this can happen during your daily stand-up. Somebody mentioned a problem and one of your colleagues said, I can help you with that. Or I'm happy to help you with that. I might not know the solution, but I can help you finding a solution. I want to jump in. That kind of stuff can increase psychological safety in your team. Openly discussing mistakes. So when there's a problem, share it. Talk about it. Because you want to learn what happened and you want to avoid the same problem happening again or a similar problem happening again. As a team, you can also reflect on the way that you're working together, how you're communicating together, how you deal with issues. And think about, okay, what is it that we can do differently? How can we improve our collaboration? How can we improve our communication? And if you want to change something in this area, I know that usually it sounds very generic, like, yeah, we want to communicate better. Yeah, okay. Make it specific. Think about an experiment. Think about something that you can do differently to communicate better. Like, okay, if I see a problem with this, I'm going to raise it on our task board with the red sticky note so that we see it. That's pretty concrete. That's something that you can try out and see how that works. We are curious, ask a lot of questions to learn and increase our understanding. Again, this is asking questions to understand, not to judge. And this can be challenging initially because if you ask a question, and certainly if you ask a question asking why, people can feel offended. As Jenny mentioned this morning, ask the question in a different format can already make a difference. It's also looking at how you are perceived in your team. If I'm working with a team as an independent facilitator, I got much more room to ask questions because people know that I'm there to understand. I'm not there to judge. I'm there to help them, and they know it. That gives me much more leeway to ask questions. This is something that actually teams can use. If you got a really difficult problem, get somebody in to facilitate your session, which is not part of the team and not your manager. Get somebody in there who can act as an independent facilitator and can help you to dig into the issue. Being open to new ideas and solutions from anyone. And the key thing here is anyone. So being open to whoever wants to bring up a problem, independent of who is bringing up the problem or bringing up solutions. A couple of other aspects which start with I. I feel safe to express my feelings and emotions. This is something that you can check with the members in your team. You can do a simple check, even anonymously, to say, okay, can you rate this on a level from 1 to 5? 1 being I don't feel safe at all, 5 being I feel completely safe. And then show that data anonymously to see what level of safety is in your team. And by just measuring this and discussing this, that can already help to increase the level of safety. One last thing, I can challenge any thinking and have a different opinion of you. If this is something that people feel in your team, wow, that would be great. If people feel like, yeah, okay, even if the whole team except me thinks like this is the best solution, I still dare to bring in another idea. And we can talk about it and then we can decide, are we going to keep it or are we going to do it differently? This is just a short list of the things that can go wrong if there's an abundance of psychological safety, but I think each one in this list is important enough to think about raising the level of psychological safety in your team or in your organization. Missing opportunities, people getting burnout, no learning from problems. These are the kind of things that you wouldn't like to see happening in your team. And I think all of these are reasons enough. And I think if you look in your organization, if only just 1 or 2 of these things are happening in your organization, that could already help you to build a business case to spend some time on psychological safety and to start working on that. And most organizations have more than 1 or 2 on this list, I'm afraid. So if you need to build a business case to make this important for your team or for your manager, use this checklist to pull out a couple of things and think about, okay, this is what we wouldn't like to see anymore in our organization. How can we work on that? So how could you increase psychological safety? As I mentioned earlier, act vulnerable. Make clear that you don't have all the answers and that you also make mistakes yourself. And just say sorry if you do. Be empathic. So don't talk about the solution, but talk about how people feel about it. Like I changed the exercise in my retrospective from asking how people feel instead of trying to find solutions with sticky notes. Drive out any fear, any blaming, toxic behavior. So if you see behavior that is decreasing the level of psychological safety, address it, talk about it, mention it, and try to find a solution in your organization to work on that. If something like this happens in a retrospective, that is the first thing that a retrospective facilitator should act upon. If you feel that the level of unsafety is going down by any blaming in a retrospective, address it immediately. Don't continue because it's going to hurt your retrospective. A lot of things on this list. Trust people. I tend to give trust by default. I start from trusting people and then see what happens. And I would say 99 out of 100 times that works out very well. So instead of thinking like people need to earn trust, no, let's just start from trusting that we all want to do a good job. And hey, that appears to be true. Okay, save me a lot of time on thinking about risk and problems. And I can still deal with situations on the way. But let's start from the assumption that we're there to work together and trust each other. One last thing, looking at psychological safety gamification. As I mentioned before, I play a lot of games in the teams that I work with. And playing games seems to work because, first of all, people like to play games, but in a game they also become their authentic self. If you set up a gaming situation, People tend to be how they normally would like to be, and they react on things like they would normally react. You're more or less getting the people at work the same person behavior as somebody would do at home or in a bar. And this authenticity can help you to really talk about any issues that are there and find a solution together. So people are much more engaged into the game, into the situation, and that helps them to find solutions. It fosters collaborations, helps people to work together to find solutions to problems. So games can do a lot to increase your psychological safety if you want to work with teams on that. And if you want to know more about this, I'm actually doing a workshop, mini workshop tomorrow on psychological safety, where we're going to be 3 different exercises in there. So I would suggest to join that workshop and participate in one of these 3 exercises to learn about what you can actually do to increase psychological safety in your team and in your organization. Thank you.